I know that I was one of two that they were considering. It was me, fresh out of, college Peace Corps versus a teacher that's been teaching for about 20, 25 years. Luckily, I think something happened with the interview process with that other teacher. So they kind of had no other option at the point. And so I'm still here 10 years later at the same school.
You took a very different approach to applying and sending out notes. And in the process, you learn something, right? Sometimes you got to go straight to somebody who's making the decisions and send the note because you never know. They might read their emails. I mean, I remember my ex-wife, when she was trying to get into a law firm as an intern, and she wasn't in law school. She didn't have a pre-law kind of degree or anything like that going for her. So she just started making calls. And I remember she called 31 law firms. And one of them, she called around lunchtime, and the staff was all gone. And one of the partners was the only one in the office. So he picked up the phone.
Lucky
and he was the only one to hear out her entire pitch while he was sitting at his desk eating his lunch. Took a chance on her, said, I like your story.
Yeah.
And it's such a human thing, right? I think we get worried about, is this an application process and the robots and resume scanners? But at the end of the day, the decisions being made are very human, and, someone actually has to work with this person. And so if you get to the right people, you can bypass systems, bypass the resume scanners are.
It definitely changed the course of my life.
So now they gave you a chance. You came, you stepped into it. Somebody backed out, and all of a sudden they were like, we just need somebody to take this role. So maybe, you weren't the first choice, but you're going to make the most of this. Tell us a little bit about that part, that beginning.
When I first got there, as a high school math teacher, it was a bit open-ended. What I like about the International School of Aruba is you're able to take curriculum from different areas of the world or different pedagogies that are working. And I think that really lends itself to then building a interactive, engaging curriculum with students. And so right away, we're working with a textbook, but then we're able to add these projects that are, STEM and STEAM related to it. So I was bothering the maintenance guy. I was like, hey, can we use your workshop? And, he'd be working with the kids to build bridges or build roller coasters, trying to make it a bit more engaging. We were doing like finance projects. Going into any classroom being 22, 23, the kids are just a couple of years younger than you. I mean, my students were 17, 18 years old. And so I really was trying to create a class that didn't just feel like the typical boring math class. And so I found myself kind of just like looking for things online, leaning on my resources, my colleagues. And it so happened that one of my colleagues then is my now husband, and he has a lot of those makerspace abilities. And so we did a lot of projects together at the school. And that kind of, snowballed into where we are today.
You mentioned in the beginning that you spent time teaching high school students and teaching calculus and different subjects like that. And then you started teaching third grade math. And now, you've gotten into this makerspace stuff. How did that develop into something? Obviously there was a journey for you to really get into that. Tell us a little bit about how you really got into it.
Yeah, so when I met my husband, we were both just working in the school. He was a makerspace teacher. I was a high school math teacher. We were already doing some project outside of school as the advisors for the Key Club here and the National Honor Society. So we were doing a lot of volunteer work. And so already doing things outside of school hours to, get the kids involved in the community. And so we realized, hey, you have similar interests that I do. You don't mind putting in the extra hours outside of school to do these things. And at the time, too, my husband has two daughters. So, as we're kind of building our family, we're also looking at other financial options. I mean, teachers around the world know that you don't just have one job, you have 2 or 3 jobs. And so we were thinking, like, how can we build something that we obviously enjoy doing as a second job, but then, can provide for our growing family. So we started doing just little camps here and there. We called them maker camps. And so during spring break or summer break, we'd come together and this will be when we had 5-year-olds using saws and drills and building their own birdhouses. We started off with those typical projects, but really trusting young kids to do it. And we found it exciting because it was definitely against the norm. And people would be like, oh, there's no way they have those kids doing those sort of projects on their own. But we started recording videos of the process, and I think that's how it grew. We were able to make something now that we call Makerpedia, which is our own social impact business. But I just started off with those basic summer camps, and then Little by little, we were able to grow into things that are a bit more consistent.
Okay. So now walk us through how you started this side venture, because the two of you had this idea. How can we bring a little something extra in and do something that's meaningful and that we really enjoy, that aligns really well with us? And the two of you did that incredibly well. You were thoughtful about it. Obviously you're living in that now. So go back to that moment where you're starting to take those first steps, because it's one thing to talk about the ideas.
Yeah.
It's another to begin taking action. So
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it came a little bit from like crisis mode of like, okay, we need some money now. And it also came
yeah,
from, like purposeful planning. I see a lot now about TikTok couples. They have business meetings, right? Every Sunday they sit down, they talk through things. At the time, my husband and I didn't realize we were doing that, but we were having like weekly check-ins to see like what's possible, brainstorming sessions, or you're laying in bed and you're just like, what can we do, right? And that's kind of where it happened organically. But again, you're going to hit a lot of road bumps. So of course we wanted to do camps, but how do you reach the population that you want to reach? What do you charge? What's fair for the population that's around you? Where do we do it? And so really setting up those partnerships was super important for us. Obviously we were working at the International School of Aruba. And so they had a makerspace at the school, and they were more than willing to let us use that makerspace because again, it's bringing in students that may not attend the school, and it's great marketing for them. And then leading on that partnership a bit kind of lend itself to then partnering with different organizations that would be like the innovation organizations on the island. And so when we see an event happening on Facebook, we reach out to that organization and kind of put ourselves out there. A little bit like blind dating a bit, like, hey, how are you? My name's Tess. And reaching out and really trying to get our names out there. Like, we want to help. And I have to say, we did a lot of free work at first, because, you just have to make people realize that, the service or that you're going to be providing will be a quality service. And so they would want to pay for something in the future. And so, there was definitely a turning point, I think, in the last maybe 2-3 years where we're like, okay, the free work needs to stop now because, again, our family grew. We went from I had 2 stepdaughters to now a new daughter, and then now I'm pregnant again. And so we had to make that shift of like, okay, I think we've now done that sort of volunteering work towards this. We still volunteer our time in different ways, but for our business self, we had to kind of say, okay, now we're legitimate, and you feel we're legitimate in providing those services.
I think it's really important to start however you can, and free is sometimes the way that you can get in a little more quickly, and just it helps you open some doors very fast, so you can show people what you're all about and what you've got going on. And then to your point, then there's this like shift you have to make. Tell us a little bit about the shift, because I think for a lot of people that's a tough thing, right? It's scary enough to even think at the beginning that you might charge somebody for this, but then you launch a few, freebies, and then you realize, hey, it's time to start charging for this. The value's there, but of course that's all easier said than done.
Yeah. And we were lucky too. We had a parent community that's always had our back from the very beginning. We've been able to rely on them to help spread the word and really grow that community. And so I think the shift kind of happened back in 2020, 2021. When COVID was happening, we had to kind of pivot because you can't have a maker camp when you couldn't see people in person. So we had to kind of change what we were doing. And at that time too, Aruba was also going through a shift of looking at education more, trying to see what they can change. At that time, we were awarded the Innovator of the Year award from the Aruban government. So I think it was the validation that led us to be like, hey, we're onto something. And so that's when we're like, okay, we need to look into how we can make this an actual business and shift it into our social impact business with what it is today. I think a second thing that influenced that is we had a shift from using the makerspace at the school to the makerspace at the University of Aruba, and that lent itself to a lot of connections beyond than school. And I think school has always been our safety place. I mean, we work there, we feel comfortable there, and that is when we were like, okay, things are going to have to change, and we might have to rely a little bit more on our other partnerships or branching out a bit more. And I think that push towards getting out of our comfort zone really helped.
So what would you say was one of the bigger challenges in making that shift to charging people?
I think for me, honestly, I just having to charge families for the education that their kids deserve, it was the most difficult part. I mean, if I can create a
Yeah.
school and everyone can go for free, that would be wonderful. But obviously, anything with Makerspace, there's a lot of tools and maintenance,
Yeah.
consumables that are involved. And so we had to start having a certain set price per hour. Recently, though, we've been able to help with that, and we feel a lot better about it. We've been able to find funding and grant writing because, again, this is our second job. So we were trying to dedicate time to it as much as we could, but it was
Yeah.
hard to find time to write a grant. So that takes a lot of time and a lot of planning. Luckily, with the help of AI, we were able to figure this out a bit better, kind of get through all the red tape and realize what is needed. And so we're still getting the income and the funds that we need to run a program, but we're able to
Yeah.
offer certain things at a more accessible rate. And honestly, that fills my heart. It makes me feel a lot better about the activities that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. What role are you playing in? So have you learned, using the tools, how to teach the topics and all of that?
We balance each other out. So I did have a master's in STEAM from the University of San Diego. So I was in
Okay.
Aruba teaching. I pursued that, and that definitely helped shape, my organization skills in terms of laying out a unit or an activity that's meaningful and relating to things in the real world. My husband is definitely the one with the skills, the tech skill set. I can manage myself on most programs a bit better than most, I
Yeah.
think. But honestly, I let him be the one to handle that because he has the patience to be able to fidget with that 3D printer when it doesn't work. But,
Yeah.
as we're doing these camps, we're teaching the kids and obviously I'm learning the skills at the same time and I'm able to then replicate it afterwards at a, I'd say an intermediate level, but my husband is the expert.